Hello, hello, hello. I'm your resident bibliophile and royal witch, Empress Celestia Libri. Welcome, welcome to today's stream. And it's going to be more of the ASMR-like reading today. So we've got the nice soft rain ambiance in the background. And of course, I'm trying to use my voice accordingly as well. And we'll see how many stories we get through today. I hope everybody's doing well. And today we're going to be starting off with a story called The 12 Brothers. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? The 12 Brothers. Once upon a time, there lived happily together a queen and a king who had 12 children, all boys. One day the king said to his consort, "If the 13th child, whom you are about to bring into the world, should be a girl, then shall the 12 boys die, that her riches may be great, and that the kingdom may fall to her alone." He then ordered 12 coffins to be made, which were filled with shavings, and in each a pillow was placed, and all of them having been locked up in a room, he gave the key thereof to the queen, and bade her to tell nobody about the matter. Oh my goodness, this is an interesting start to the story already. But the mother sat crying the whole day long, so that her youngest child, who was always with her, and whom she had named Benjamin, said to her, "Mother dear, why are you so sorrowful?" "My dearest child," she replied, "I dare not tell you." But he let her have no peace until she went and unlocked the room and showed him the 12 coffins filled with shavings. Then she said, "My dearest Benjamin, these coffins your father has had prepared for yourself and your 11 brothers. For if I bring a little girl into the world, you will be all killed together and buried in them." And as she wept while she spoke these words, the son comforted her, saying, "Do not cry, dear mother. We will help ourselves and go away." But she said, "Go with your 11 brothers into the woods, and let one of you climb into the highest tree which is to be found, and keep watch, looking towards the tower of the castle here. If I bear a little son, I will hang out a white flag, and you may venture home again. But if I bear a little daughter, I will hang out a red flag, and then flee away as quickly as you can, and God preserve you. Every night I will arise and pray for you, in winter that you may have a fire to warm yourselves, and in summer that you may not be melted with the heat." Soon after she gave her blessing to all her sons, and they went away into the forest. Each kept watch in turn, sitting upon the highest oak and looking towards the tower. When 11 days had passed by, and it came to be Benjamin's turn, he perceived a flag hung out, but it was not the white flag, but the red flag which announced that they must all die. As the brothers heard this, they became very angry and said, "Shall we suffer death on account of a maiden? Let us swear that we will avenge ourselves wherever we find a maiden. Her red blood shall flow." Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. Thereupon they went deeper into the forest, and in the middle, where it was most gloomy, they found a little charmed cottage standing empty, and they said, "Here we will dwell, and you, Benjamin, as you are the youngest and the weakest, shall stop here and keep house, while we go out to fetch meat." So they set forth into the forest, and shot hares and wild fawns, birds and pigeons, and what else they could find. These they brought home to Benjamin, who cooked them for them Let me try that again. These they brought home to Benjamin, who cooked them for them to appease their hunger. In this little cottage they lived 10 years together, and the time passed very quickly. The little daughter whom their mother, the queen, had borne was now grown up. She had a kind heart, was very beautiful, and always wore a golden star upon her brow. Once, when there was a great wash, she saw 12 boys' shirts hanging up, and she asked her mother, "To whom do these 12 shirts belong? For they are much too small for my father." Then she answered with a heavy heart, "My dear child, they belong to your 12 brothers." The maiden replied, "Where are my 12 brothers? I have never yet heard of them." The queen answered, "God only knows where they are. They have wandered into the wide world." Then she took the maiden, and unlocking the room, showed her 12 coffins with the shavings and pillows. "These coffins," said she, "were ordered for your brothers, but they went away secretly before you were born." And she told her how everything had happened. Then the maiden said, "Do not cry, dear mother. I will go forth and seek my brothers." And taking the 12 shirts, she set out at once straight into the great forest. All day long she walked on, and in the evening she came to the charmed house, into which she stepped. There she found a young lad, who asked her, "Whence dost thou come, and whither goest thou?" And he stood astonished to see how beautiful she was, and at the queenly robe she wore, and the star upon her brow. Then she answered, "I am the king's daughter, and I am seeking my 12 brothers, and I will go as far as heaven is blue until I find them." And she showed him the 12 shirts which belonged to them. Benjamin perceived at once that it was his sister, and he said, "I am Benjamin, thy youngest brother." At his words she began to weep for joy, and Benjamin wept also, and they kissed and embraced one another with the greatest affection. Presently he said, "Dear sister, there is one terrible condition we have agreed together, that every maiden whom we meet shall die, because we were obliged to leave our kingdom on account of a maiden." "Oh no." Then the maiden replied, "I will willingly die, if I can by that means release my 12 brothers." "Oh." "No," answered he, "thou shalt not die. Hide thyself under the tub until our 11 brothers come home, with whom I shall then be united." She did so, and when night came, the others returned from hunting, and their dinner was made ready, and as they sat at table eating, they asked, "What is the news?" Benjamin said, "Do you not know?" "No," they answered. Then he spoke again, "You have been in the forest, and I have stopped at home. Yet I know more than you." "Tell us directly," they exclaimed. He answered, "First promise me that you will not kill the first maiden who shall meet us." "Yes, we promise," they exclaimed. "She shall have pardon. Now tell us at once." Then he said, "Our sister is here." And lifting up the tub, the king's daughter came from beneath, looking most beautiful, delicate, and gentle in her royal robes, and with the golden star upon her brow. The sight gladdened them all, and falling upon her neck, they kissed her and loved her with all their hearts. Now she stopped at home with Benjamin, and helped him in his work, while the 11 others went into the wood and caught wild animals, deer, birds, and pigeons, for their eating, which their sister and brother took care to make ready. The sister sought for wood for the fire, and for the vegetables which she dressed, and put the pots on the fire, so that their dinner was always ready when the 11 came home. She also kept order in the cottage, and covered the beds with beautiful white and clean sheets, and the brothers were always contented, and they all lived in great unity. One day, when the brother and sister had made ready a most excellent meal, and they were all assembled, they sat down and ate and drank, and were full of happiness. But there was a little garden belonging to the charmed house, in which stood 12 lilies, which are also called student lilies. And the sister, thinking to give her 12 brothers a pleasure, broke off the 12 flowers, intending to give each of them one. But as she broke off the flowers, at the same moment the 12 brothers were changed into 12 crows, and flew off into the forest, and at the same moment the house and garden both disappeared. Oh, interesting. Thus the poor maiden was alone in the wild forest, and as she looked round, an old woman stood near her, who said, "My child, what hast thou done? Why didst thou not leave the 12 white flowers? They were thy brothers, who are now changed into crows." Then the maiden asked with tears, "Is there no means of saving them?" "There is but one way in the whole world," said the old woman, "but that is so difficult that thou canst not free them. Thou must be dumb for 7 years. That means you can't speak. Thou mayest not speak, nor laugh, and if thou speakest but one single word, even if it wants but 1 hour of the 7 years, all will be in vain, and thy brothers will die at that single word." Then the maiden said in her heart, "I know for certain that I shall free my brothers." And she went and sought a lofty tree, and sitting upon it she spun, and neither spoke nor laughed. Now it happened once that a king was hunting in the forest, who had a large greyhound, which ran to the tree on which the maiden sat, and springing round barked furiously. So the king came up and saw the beautiful girl with the golden star upon her brow, and was so enchanted with her beauty that he asked her if she would become his bride. To this she gave no answer, but slightly nodded with her head. So the king, mounting the tree himself, brought her down, and placing her upon his horse, carried her home. Then the wedding was celebrated with great pomp and joy, but the bride neither spoke nor laughed. Excuse me, sorry. After they had lived contentedly together 2 years, the king's mother, who was a wicked woman, began to slander the young queen, and said to the king, "This is a common beggar girl whom you have brought home with you. Who knows what impish tricks she practiced at home? If she be dumb and not able to speak, she might still laugh once, but they who do not laugh have a bad conscience." The king would not at first believe it, but the old woman persisted in it so long, and accused the queen of so many wicked things, that the king at last let himself be persuaded, and she was condemned to die. Now a great fire was kindled in the courtyard in which she was to be burnt, and the king, standing above at a window, looked on with tearful eyes, because he still loved her so much. And now she was bound to the stake, and the fire began to lick her clothing with its red tongues, and just at the time the last moment of the 7 years expired. Then a whirring was heard in the air, and 12 crows came flying by, and sank down to the earth, and as they alighted on the ground, they became her 12 brothers whom she had freed. They tore away the fire from around her, and extinguishing the flames, set their sister free, and kissed and embraced her. And now, as she could open her mouth and speak, she told the king why she was dumb, and why she never laughed. And the king was highly pleased when he heard she was innocent, and they all lived together in great happiness to the end of their lives. Wow, what a story. Oh my goodness. And that was the 12 brothers. All right, I'm going to get another swig of water here. Try to take care of my voice while I'm reading. All right. The next story is titled The Little Brother and Sister. Let's see how long this one is. A little bit longer, I think. All right. The Little Brother and Sister. There was once a little brother who took his sister by the hand and said, "Since our own dear mother's death, we have not had one happy hour. Our stepmother beats us every day, and if we come near her, kicks us away with her foot. Our food is the hard crusts of bread which are left, and even the dog under the table fares better than we, for he often gets a nice morsel. Come, let us wander forth into the wide world." Ouch. So the whole day long they traveled over meadows, fields, and stones, and when it rained, the sister said, "It is heaven crying with our hearts." By evening they came into the large forest, and were so wearied with grief, hunger, and their long walk, that they laid themselves down in a hollow tree and went to sleep. When they awoke the next morning, the sun had already risen high in the heavens, and it shone quite hot in the tree, so that the little boy said to his sister, "I am so thirsty. If I knew where there was a brook, I would go and drink. Ah, I think I hear one running." And so saying, he got up, and taking his sister's hand, they went in search of the brook. The wicked stepmother, however, was a witch, and had remarked the departure of the two children, and sneaking after them secretly, as is the habit of witches, she had bewitched all the springs in the forest. Presently they found a brook, which ran trippingly over the pebbles, and the brother would have drunk out of it, but the sister heard how it said as it ran along, "Who drinks of me will become a tiger." So the sister exclaimed, "I pray you, brother, drink not, or you will become a tiger and tear me to pieces." So the brother did not drink, although his thirst was so great, and he said, "I will wait till the next brook." As they came to the second, the sister heard it say, "Who drinks of me becomes a wolf." So the sister ran up crying, "Brother, do not drink, or you will become a wolf and eat me up." Then the brother did not drink, saying, "I will wait till we come to the next spring, but then I must drink. You may say what you will, my thirst is much too great." Just as they reached the third brook, the sister heard the voice saying, "Who drinks of me will become a fawn. Who drinks of me will become a fawn." So the sister said, "Oh, my brother, do not drink, or you will be changed to a fawn and run away from me." But he had already kneeled down and drunk of the water, and as the first drops passed his lips, his form became that of a fawn. At first the sister cried over her little changed brother, and he wept too, and knelt by her very sorrowful. But at last the maiden said, "Be still, dear little fawn, and I will never forsake you." And undoing her golden garter, she put it round his neck, and weaving rushes made a white girdle to lead him with. This she tied to him, and taking the other end in her hand, she led him away, and they traveled deeper and deeper into the forest. After they had walked a long distance, they came to a little hut, and the maiden, peeping in, found it empty, and thought, "Here we can stay and dwell." Then she looked for leaves and moss to make a soft couch for the fawn, and every morning she went out and collected roots and berries and nuts for herself, and tender grass for the fawn, which he ate out of her hand, and played happily around her. In the evening, when the sister was tired and had said her prayers, she laid her head upon the back of the fawn, which served for a pillow on which she slept soundly. Had but the brother regained his own proper form, their life would have been happy indeed. Thus they dwelt in this wilderness, and some time had elapsed, when it happened that the king of the country held a great hunt in the forest, and now resounded through the trees the blowing of horns, the barking of dogs, and the lusty cries of the hunters, so that the little fawn heard them and wanted very much to join. "Ah," he said to his sister, "let me go to the hunt. I cannot restrain myself any longer," and he begged so hard that at last she consented. "But," she said to him, "return again in the evening, for I shall shut my door against the wild huntsman, and that I may know you, do you knock and say, 'Sister, let me in.' And if you do not speak, I shall not open the door." As soon as she had said this, the little fawn sprang off, quite glad and merry in the fresh breeze. The king and his huntsmen perceived the beautiful animal and pursued him, but they could not catch him. And when they thought they had him for certain, he sprang away over the bushes and got out of sight. Just as it was getting dark, he ran up to the hut and, knocking, said, "Sister mine, let me in." Then she undid the little door, and he went in, and rested all night long upon his soft couch. The next morning the hunt was commenced again, and as soon as the little fawn heard the horns and the tally-ho of the sportsmen, he could not rest, and said, "Sister dear, open the door, I must be off." The sister opened it, saying, "Return at evening, mind, and say the words as before." When the king and his huntsmen saw again the fawn with the golden necklace, they followed him close, but he was too nimble and quick for them. The whole day long they kept up with him, but towards evening the huntsmen made a circle round him, and one wounded him slightly in the foot behind, so that he could only run slowly. Then one of them slipped after him to the little hut, and he heard him say, "Sister dear, open the door," and saw that the door was open and immediately shut behind him. The huntsman, having observed all this, went and told the king what he had seen and heard, and he said, "On the morrow I will once more pursue him." The sister, however, was terribly frightened when she saw her fawn was wounded, and washing off the blood, she put herbs upon the foot, and said, "Go and rest upon your bed, dear fawn, that the wound may heal." It was so slight that the next morning he felt nothing of it, and when he heard the hunting cries outside, he exclaimed, "I cannot stop away, I must be there, and none shall catch me so easily again." The sister wept very much and told him, "Soon they will kill you, and I shall be here all alone in this forest, forsaken by all the world. I cannot let you go." "I shall die here in vexation," answered the fawn, "if you do not, for when I hear the horn, I think I shall jump out of my shoes." The sister, finding she could not prevent him, opened the door with a heavy heart, and the fawn jumped out quite delighted into the forest. As soon as the king perceived him, he said to his huntsmen, "Follow him all day long till the evening, but let no one do him any injury." When the sun had set, the king asked his huntsmen to show him the hut, and as they came to it, he knocked at the door and said, "Let me in, dear sister." When the door was opened, and stepping in, the king saw a maiden more beautiful than he had ever before seen. She was frightened when she saw not her fawn, but a man step in, who had a golden crown upon his head. But the king, looking at her with a friendly glance, reached her his hand, saying, "Will you go with me to my castle and be my dear wife?" "Oh, yes," replied the maiden, "but the fawn must go too. Him I will never forsake." The king replied, "He shall remain with you as long as you live, and shall want for nothing. in the meantime the fawn had come in, and the sister, binding the girdle to him, again took it in her hand and led him away with her out of the hut. The king took the beautiful maiden upon his horse and rode to his castle, where the wedding was celebrated with great splendor, and she became queen, and they lived together a long time, while the fawn was taken care of and lived well, playing about the castle garden. The wicked stepmother, however, on whose account the children had wandered forth into the world, did not think but that the sister had been torn in pieces by the wild beasts, and the little brother hunted to death in his fawn's shape by the hunters. As soon as she heard how happy they had become, and how everything prospered with them, envy and jealousy were aroused in her heart and left her no peace, and she was always thinking in what way she could work misfortune to them. Her own daughter, who was as ugly as night, and had but one eye, for which she was continually reproached, said, "The luck of being a queen has never yet happened to me." "Be quiet now," said the old woman, "and make yourself contented. When the time comes, I shall be at hand." As soon then as the time came when the queen brought into the world a beautiful little boy, which happened when the king was out hunting, the old witch took the form of a chambermaid, and got into the room where the queen was lying, and said to her, "The bath is ready, which will restore you and give you fresh strength. Be quick before it gets cold." Her daughter being at hand, they carried the weak queen between them into the room and laid her in the bath. And then, shutting the door, they ran off. But first they had made up an immense fire in the stove, which must soon suffocate the young queen. Oh no. When this was done, the old woman took her daughter, and putting a cap on her, laid her in the bed in the queen's place. She gave her to the form and appearance of the real queen as far as she could, but she could not restore the lost eye, and so that the king might not notice it, she turned upon that side where there was no eye. When he came home at evening and heard that a son was born to him, he was much delighted, and prepared to go to his wife's bedside to see how she did. So the old woman called out in a great hurry, "For your life, do not undraw the curtains. The queen must not yet see the light, and must be kept quiet." So the king went away, and did not discover that a false queen was laid in the bed. When midnight came and everyone was asleep, the nurse, who sat by herself, wide awake, near the cradle in the nursery, saw the door open, and the true queen came in. She took the child in her arms and rocked it a while, and then, shaking up its pillow, laid it down in its cradle and covered it over again. She did not forget the fawn either, but going to the corner where he was, stroked his back, and then went silently out at the door. The nurse asked in the morning of the guards if anyone had passed into the castle during the night, but they answered, "No, we have seen nobody." For many nights afterwards she came constantly, and never spoke a word, and the nurse saw her always, but she would not trust herself to speak about it to anyone. When some time had passed away, the queen one night began to speak and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Twice more will I come, but never again." The nurse made no reply, but when she had disappeared, went to the king and told him all. The king exclaimed, "Oh heavens, what does this mean? The next night I will watch myself by the child." In the evening he went into the nursery, and about midnight the queen appeared and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Once more will I come, but never again." And she nursed the child as she was used to do, and then disappeared. The king dared not speak, But he watched the following night, and this time she said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? This time will I come, but never again." At these words the king could hold back no longer, but sprang up and said, "You can be no other than my dear wife." Then she answered, "Yes, I am your dear wife." And at that moment her life was restored by God's mercy, and she was again as beautiful and charming as ever. She told the king the fraud which the witch and her daughter had practiced upon him, and he had them both tried and sentence pronounced against them. The daughter was taken into the forest, where the wild beasts tore her in pieces, but the old witch was led to the fire and miserably burnt. And as soon as she was reduced to ashes, the little fawn was unbewitched and received again his human form, and the brother and sister lived happily together to the end of their days. Wow, yikes, what a story. I think I accidentally missed a page. A couple of pages, actually. Let me go back and check, because something doesn't seem right. No. No, I didn't miss anything. Huh, weird. Okay. That was a very interesting story indeed, I must say. It's interesting to read these old stories, which the Brothers Grimm are actually more recent than one might think. I think they were around like 17 and 1800s, but I think I had this mental perception before that they were like 1600s or something, maybe even 1500s, I'm not sure. And then I found out that they were like 17 and 1800s, which, I mean, yeah, that's like a couple hundred years ago. That's still quite some time ago, but still. But to actually like read a lot of these stories, stories of which were given to children, like these were children's stories from my understanding, and yet some of the things that you read in these stories is just like, wow. A little bit crazy. Some of the stuff in here like is kind of intense, especially like maybe for some younger children. And some of the things too, like if you've been paying attention to the stories that I've even just read today, in fact, this particular story, like the king took this young maiden who, like, she was young. From the gist of the story, like she would have been under like the age of 16. From the sounds of it, now I could be wrong on that, but like she was kind of basically a child. Like that would not go over well in today's day and age. We don't do child brides. So to read stuff like that in some of these stories, it just kind of makes you raise your eyebrow a little bit, because it's a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's icky. I'll just put it that way. I feel like the word that I'm looking for starts with a D, but I can't place it. Like it's not registering in my brain. But whatever. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get another sip of water. or two. All right. And we'll move on to the next story. Hopefully you're finding these interesting, and that it's good background ambiance for you, if you will. All right. So the next story is titled The Three Little Men in the Wood. Once upon a time, there lived a man whose wife had died, and a woman also who had lost her husband. And this man and this woman had each a daughter. These two maidens were friendly with each other and used to walk together, and one day they came by the widow's house. Then the widow said to the man's daughter, "Do you hear? Tell your father I wish to marry him, and you shall every morning wash in milk and drink wine, but my daughter shall wash in water and drink water." That's an interesting difference to make. So the girl went home and told her father what the woman had said, and he replied, "What shall I do? Marriage is a comfort, but it is also a torment." At last, as he could form no conclusion, he drew off his boot and said, "Take this boot, which has a hole in the sole, and go with it out of doors, and hang it on the great nail, and then pour water into it. If it holds the water, I will again take a wife, but if it runs through, I will not have her." The girl did as he bid her, but the water drew the hole together, and the boot became full to overflowing. So she told her father how it had happened, and he, getting up, saw it was quite true. And going to the widow, he settled the matter, and the wedding was celebrated. The next morning, when the two girls arose, milk to wash in and wine to drink were set for the man's daughter, but only water, both for washing and drinking, for the woman's daughter. The second morning, water for washing and drinking stood before both the man's daughter and the woman's. And on the third morning, water to wash in and water to drink were set before the man's daughter, and milk to wash in and wine to drink before the woman's daughter. And so it continued. This is a very interesting thing to do. Soon the woman had a deadly hatred of her stepdaughter, and knew not how to behave badly enough to her from day to day. She was envious too, because her stepdaughter was beautiful and lovely, and her own daughter was ugly and hateful. Once in the winter time, when water had frozen as hard as a stone, and hill and valley were covered with snow, the woman made a cloak of paper, and called the maiden to her, and said, "Put on this cloak, and go away into the wood to fetch me a little basketful of strawberries, for I have a wish for some." "Mercy on us," said the maiden, "in winter there are no strawberries growing. The ground is frozen, and the snow, too, has covered up everything. And why must I go in that paper cloak? It is so cold out of doors that it freezes one's breath even, and the wind will blow it off, and the thorns will tear it from my body." "Will you dare to contradict me?" said the stepmother. "Make haste off, and let me not see you again until you have found me a basket of strawberries." Then she gave her a small piece of dry bread, saying, On that you must subsist the whole day." But she thought, "Out of doors she will be frozen and starved, so that my eyes will never see her again." So the girl did as she was told, and put on the paper cloak, and went away with the basket. Far and near there was nothing but snow, and not a green blade was to be seen. When she came to the forest, she discovered a little cottage, out of which 3 little dwarfs were peeping. The girl wished them good morning and knocked gently at the door. They called her in, and entering the room, she sat down on a bench by the fire to warm herself and eat her breakfast. The dwarfs called out, "Give us some of it." "Willingly," she replied, and dividing her bread in 2, she gave them half. They asked, "What do you here in the forest in the winter time in this thin cloak?" "Ah," she answered, "I must seek a basket full of strawberries, and I dare not return home until I can take them with me." When she had eaten her bread, they gave her a broom, saying, "Sweep away the snow with this from the back door." But when she was gone out of doors, the 3 dwarfs said to one another, "What shall we give her because she is so gentle and good, and has shared her bread with us?" Then said the first, "I grant to her that she shall become more beautiful every day." The second said, "I grant that a piece of gold shall fall out of her mouth for every word she speaks." That's a very interesting thing to do. The third said, "I grant that a king shall come and make her his bride." Meanwhile, the girl had done as the dwarfs had bidden her, and had swept away the snow from behind the house. And what do you think she found there? Actually ripe strawberries, which came quite red and sweet up under the snow. So, filling her basket in great glee, she thanked the little men and gave them each her hand, and then ran home to take her stepmother what she wished for. As she went in and said, "Good evening," a piece of gold fell from her mouth. Thereupon she related what had happened to her in the forest, but at every word she spoke, a piece of gold fell, so that the whole floor was covered. I wonder if that's uncomfortable at all for that to happen. The girl went into the... I missed a paragraph. Let me back up. "Just to see her arrogance," said the stepsister, "to throw away money in that way." But in her heart she was jealous, and wished to go into the forest too to seek strawberries. Her mother said, "No, my dear daughter, it is too cold. You will be frozen." But as her girl let her have no peace, she at last consented, and made her a beautiful fur cloak to put on. She also gave her buttered bread and cooked meat to eat on the way. The girl went into the forest and came straight to the little cottage. The 3 dwarfs were peeping out again, but she did not greet them, and stumbling in without looking at them or speaking, she entered the room, and seating herself by the fire, began to eat the bread and butter and meat. "Give us some of that," exclaimed the dwarfs, but she answered, "I have not got enough for myself, so how can I give any away?" When she had finished, they said, "You have a broom there. Go and sweep the back door clean." "Oh, sweep it yourself," she replied. "I am not your servant." When she saw that they would not give her anything, she went out at the door, and the 3 dwarfs said to each other, "What shall we give her? She is so ill behaved, and has such a bad and envious disposition, that nobody can wish well to her." The first said, "I will grant that she becomes more ugly every day." The second said, "I grant that every word she speaks, a toad shall spring out of her mouth." Yikes. The third said, "I grant that she shall die a miserable death." Meanwhile, the girl had been looking for strawberries out of doors, but as she could find none, she went home very peevish. When she opened her mouth to tell her mother what had happened to her in the forest, a toad jumped out of her mouth at each word, so that everyone fled away from her in horror. That has got to be so disgusting. Ew. The stepmother was now still more vexed, and was always thinking how she could do the most harm to her husband's daughter, who every day became more beautiful. At last she took a kettle, set it on the fire, and boiled a net therein. When it was sodden, she hung it on the shoulder of the poor girl, and gave her an axe, that she might go upon the frozen pond and cut a hole in the ice to drag the net. She obeyed, and went away and cut an ice hole. And while she was cutting, an elegant carriage came by, in which the king sat. The carriage stopped, and the king asked, "My child, who are you, and what do you here?" "I am a poor girl, and am dragging a net," she said. Then the king pitied her, and saw how beautiful she was, and said, "Will you come with me, or will you go with me?" "Yes, indeed, with all my heart," she replied, for she was glad to get out of the sight of her mother and sister. So she was handed into the carriage, and driven away with the king, and as soon as they arrived at his castle, the wedding was celebrated with great splendor, as the dwarfs had granted to the maiden. After a year the young queen bore a son, and when the stepmother heard of her great good fortune, she came to the castle with her daughter, and behaved as if she had come on a visit. Okay. But one day, when the king had gone out, and no one was present, this bad woman seized the queen by the head, and her daughter caught hold of her foot, and raising her out of bed, they threw her out of the window into the river which ran past. Then, laying her ugly daughter in the bed, the old woman covered her up, even over her head, and when the king came back, he wished to speak to his wife, but the old woman exclaimed, "Softly, softly, do not go near her. She is lying in a beautiful sleep, and must be kept quiet today." The king, not thinking of any evil design, came again the next morning, the first thing, and when he spoke to his wife, and she answered, a toad sprang out of her mouth at every word, as before a piece of gold had done. So he asked what happened, and the old woman said, that is produced by her weakness. She will soon lose it again." But in the night the kitchen boy saw a duck swimming through the brook, and the duck said, "King, king, what are you doing? Are you sleeping, or are you waking?" And he gave no answer. And as he gave no answer, the duck said, "What are my guests a-doing?" Then the boy answered, "They all sleep sound." And she asked him, "How fares my child?" And he replied, "In his cradle he sleeps." Then she came up in the form of the queen to the cradle, and gave the child drink, shook up his bed, and covered him up, and then swam again away as a duck through the brook. The second night she came again, and on the third she said to the kitchen boy, "Go and tell the king to take his sword and swing it thrice over me on the threshold." Then the boy ran and told the king, who came with his sword and swung it thrice over the duck, and at the third time his bride stood before him, bright, living, and healthful, as she had been before. Now the king was in great happiness, but he hid the queen in a chamber until the Sunday when the child was to be christened. And when all was finished, he asked, "What ought to be done to one who takes another out of bed and throws her into the river?" "Nothing could be more proper," said the old woman, "than to put such an one into a cask, stuck round with nails, and to roll it down the hill into the river." Then the king said, "You have spoken your own sentence." And ordering a cask to be fetched, he caused the old woman and her daughter to be put into it, and the bottom being nailed up, the cask was rolled down the hill until it fell into the water. Wow. Yikes. There's a death sentence for you. Phew. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Ooh. We're going to do a couple more stories. And then we'll see how I feel. But I'm going to get another thing of water. Alrighty. Okay, this next one is rather short. And it's called The Three Spinsters. There was once a lazy girl who would not spin, and let her mother say what she would, she could not get her to work. At last, the mother, getting both angry and impatient, gave her a blow which made the girl cry very loud. Just then the queen passing by heard the noise, and stopping the carriage, she stepped into the house and asked the mother why she beat her daughter in such a way that the passers-by in the street heard her shrieks. The mother, however, was ashamed that her daughter's laziness should be known, and said, I cannot make her leave off spinning. She will spin forever and ever, and I am so poor that I cannot procure the flax. The queen replied, I never heard anything I like better than spinning, and I am never more pleased than when the wheels are whirring. Let your daughter go with me to the castle. I have flax enough, and she may spin as much as she pleases. The mother was very glad at heart, and the queen took the girl home with her. As soon as they entered the castle, she led her up into 3 rooms, which were all full of the finest flax from top to bottom. Now spin this flax for me, said the queen, and when you have prepared it all, you shall have my eldest son for a husband. Although you are poor, I do not despise you on that account. Your unwearied industry is dowry enough. The girl, however, was inwardly frightened, for she could not have spun the flax had she sat there from morning till night, until she was 300 years old. When she was left alone, she began to cry, and thus she sat 3 days without stirring a hand. On the 3rd day the queen came, and when she saw that nothing was yet spun, she wondered, and the maiden excused herself by saying that she had not been able to begin yet on account of her great sorrow at leaving her mother's house. So the queen was satisfied, but on leaving she said, You must begin to work for me tomorrow. As soon as the girl was again alone, she knew not how to act or help herself, and in her vexation she went and looked out the window. She saw 3 women passing by, the first of whom had a broad flat foot, the second such a large under lip that it reached nearly to her chin, and the third a very big thumb. She stopped before the window, and looking up, asked the girl what she wanted. She told them her trouble, and they offered her their help, saying, Will you invite us to the wedding and not be ashamed of us, but call us your aunts and let us sit at your table? If you do all these, we will spin the flax in a very short time for you. With all my heart, replied the girl. Come in and begin at once. Then she let in these 3 women, and making a clear place in the first room, they sat themselves down and began spinning. One drew the thread and trod the wheel, the other moistened the thread, and the third pressed it and beat with her fingers on the table. And as often as she did so, a pile of thread fell on the ground. Wow. Which was spun in the finest manner. The girl hid the 3 spinsters, however, from the queen, and showed her as often as she came the heaps of spun yarn, so that she received no end of praise. When the first room was empty, the 3 women went to the second, and at length the third, so that soon all was cleared out. Now the three spinsters took leave, saying to the girl, "Do not forget what you promised us. It will make you fortune. It will make your fortune." When the girl showed the queen the empty rooms and the great pile of thread, the wedding was performed, and the bridegroom was glad that he had such a clever and industrious wife, and praised her exceedingly. "I have 3 aunts," said the girl, "who have done me much service, so I would not willingly forget them in my good fortune. Allow me therefore to invite them to the wedding and sit with me at table." The queen and the bridegroom asked, "What should we not allow it? Or why should we not allow it?" When the feast was begun, the 3 old maids entered in with great splendor, and the bride said, "You are welcome, dear aunts." "Ah," said the bridegroom, "how do you come by such ugly friends?" And going up to the one with the big foot, he asked, "Why have you such a broad foot?" From treading, she replied. Then he went to the second and asked, "Why have you such an overhanging lip?" "From licking," she answered, "from licking." Then he asked the third, "Why have you such a broad thumb?" "From pressing the thread," she replied, "from pressing the thread." At this the prince was frightened and said, "Therefore my bride shall never touch a spinning wheel again." And so she was set free from the unlucky flax spinning. All right, well, the next story is a rather well-known classic. It's Hansel and Gretel, or Grethel, as this it has an H, which I'm not sure Gretel is typically spelled with an H. Maybe it is, and I just don't remember. So I'm just going to call it Hansel and Gretel, like we usually do in the English language. All right. Again, more water. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there dwelt near a large wood a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children by his former marriage, a little boy called Hansel and a girl named Gretel. He had little enough to break or bite, and once, when there was a great famine in the land, he could not procure even his daily bread. And as he lay thinking in his bed one evening, rolling about for trouble, he sighed and said to his wife, "What will become of us? How can we feed our children when we have no more than we can eat ourselves?" "Know then, my husband," answered she, "we will lead them away quite early in the morning into the thickest part of the wood, and there make them a fire, and give them each a little piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone, so they will not find the way home again, and we shall be freed from them." "No, wife," replied he, "that I can never do. How can you bring your heart to leave my children all alone in the wood? For the wild beasts will soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you simpleton," said she, "then we must all 4 die of hunger. You had better plan the coffins for us." But she left him no peace till he consented, saying, "Ah, but I shall regret the poor children." The 2 children, however, had not gone to sleep for very hunger, and so they overheard what the stepmother said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and said to Hansel, hold on, I need to flip the page. "What will become of us?" "Be quiet, Gretel," said he. "Do not cry. I will soon help you." And as soon as their parents had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his coat, and unbarring the back door, slipped out. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay before the door seemed like silver pieces. They glistened so brightly. Hansel stooped down and put as many into his pocket as it would hold, and then, going back, he said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear sister, and sleep in peace. God will not forsake us." And so saying, he went to bed again. The next morning, before the sun arose, the wife went and awoke the two children. "Get up, you lazy things. We are going into the forest to chop wood." Then she gave them each a piece of bread, saying, "There is something for your dinner. Do not eat it before the time, for you will get nothing else." Gretel took the bread in her apron, for Hansel's pocket was full of pebbles. And so they all set out upon their way. When they had gone a little distance, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and so he repeated several times till his father said, "Hansel, what are you peeping at, and why do you lag behind? Take care and remember your legs." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my white cat sitting upon the roof of the house, and trying to say good-bye." "You simpleton," said the wife, "that is not a cat. It is only the sun shining on the white chimney." But in reality, Hansel was not looking at a cat, but every time he stopped, he dropped a pebble out of his pocket upon the path. Smart kid. When they came to the middle of the wood, the father told the children to collect wood, and he would make them a fire, so that they should not be cold. So Hansel and Gretel gathered together quite a little mountain of twigs. Then they set fire to them, and as the flame burnt up high, the wife said, "Now, you children, lie down near the fire and rest yourselves, whilst we go into the forest and chop wood. When we are ready, I will come and call you." Hansel and Gretel sat down by the fire, and when it was noon, each ate the piece of bread, and because they could hear the blows of an axe, they thought their father was near. But it was not an axe, but a branch which he had bound to a withered tree, so that it would be blown to and fro by the wind. They waited so long that at last their eyes closed from weariness, and they fell fast asleep. When they awoke, it was quite dark, and Hansel and Gretel began to cry, "How shall we get out of the wood?" But Hansel tried to comfort her by saying, "Wait a little while till the moon rises, and we will quickly find the way." The moon soon shone forth, and Hansel, taking his sister's hand, followed the pebbles which glittered like new coined silver pieces, and showed them the path. All night long they walked on, and as day broke they came to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the wife opened it and saw Hansel and Gretel, she exclaimed, "You wicked children! Why did you sleep so long in the wood? We thought you were never coming home again." But the father was very glad, for it had grieved his heart to leave them all alone. Not long afterwards, there was again great scarcity in every corner of the land, and one night the children overheard their mother saying to their father, "Everything is again consumed. We have only half a loaf left." And then the song is ended. The children must be sent away. We will take them deeper into the wood, so that they may not find the way out again. It is the only means of escape for us. But her husband felt heavy at heart and thought it were better to share the last crumb with the children. His wife, however, would listen to nothing that he said, and scolded and reproached him without end. He who says A must be B too, and he who consents the first time must also the second. The children, however, had heard the conversation as they lay awake, and as soon as the old people went to sleep, Hansel got up, intending to pick up some pebbles as before. but the wife had locked the door so that he could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted Gretel, saying, "Do not cry, sleep in quiet. The good God will not forsake us." Early in the morning, the stepmother came and pulled them out of bed and gave them each a slice of bread, which was still smaller than the former piece. On the way, Hansel broke in his pocket and, stopping every now and then, dropped a crumb upon the path. "Hansel, why do you stop and look about?" said the father. "Keep in the path." "I am looking at my little dove," answered Hansel, nodding a goodbye to me. "Simpleton," said the wife, "that is no dove, but only the sun shining on the chimney." So Hansel kept still dropping crumbs as he went along. The mother led the children deep into the wood where they had never been before, and there, making an immense fire, she said to them, "Sit down here and rest, and when you feel tired, you can sleep for a little while. We are going into the forest to hew wood, and in the evening, when we are ready, we will come and fetch you." When noon came, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had strewn his on the path. Then they went to sleep, but the evening arrived, and no one came to visit the poor children, and in the dark night they awoke. And Hansel comforted his sister by saying, "Only wait, Gretel, till the moon comes out. Then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have dropped, and they will show us the way home." The moon shone, and they got up, but they could not see any crumbs, for the thousands of birds which had been flying about in the woods and fields had picked them all up. Hansel kept saying to Gretel, "We will soon find the way." But they did not, and they walked the whole night long and the next day, but still they did not come out of the wood, and they got so hungry, for they had nothing to eat but the berries which they found upon the bushes. Soon they got so tired that they could not drag themselves along, so they laid down under a tree and went to sleep. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house, and they still walked on, but they only got deeper and deeper into the wood, and Hansel saw that if help did not come very soon, they would die of hunger. As soon as it was noon, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting upon a bough, which sang so sweetly that they stood still and listened to it. It soon left off, and spreading its wings flew off, and they followed it until it arrived at a cottage, upon the roof of it, of which it perched. And when they went close up to it, they saw that the cottage was made of bread and cakes, and the window panes were made of clear sugar. "We will go in there," said Hansel, "and have a glorious feast. I will eat a piece of the roof, and you can eat the window. Will they not be sweet?" So Hansel reached up and broke a piece off of the roof, in order to see how it tasted, while Gretel stepped up to the window and began to bite it. Then a sweet voice called out in the room, "Tip, tap, tip, tap, who raps at my door?" And the children answered, the wind, the child of heaven." And they went on eating without interruption. Hansel thought the roof tasted very nice, and so he tore off a great piece, while Gretel broke a large round pane out of the window and sat down quite contentedly. Just then the door opened, and a very old woman, walking upon crutches, came out. Hansel and Gretel were so frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. But the old woman, nodding her head, said, "Ah, you dear children, what has brought you here? Come in and stop with me, and no harm shall befall you." And so saying, she took them both by the hand and led them into her cottage. A good meal of milk and pancakes, with sugar, apples, and nuts, were spread on the table, and in the back room were 2 nice little beds covered with white, where Hansel and Gretel laid themselves down and thought themselves in heaven. The old woman had behaved very kindly to them, but in reality she was a wicked witch who waylaid children and built the bread house in order to entice them in. But as soon as they were in her power, she killed them and cooked and ate them, and made a great festival of the day. Witches have red eyes and cannot see very far, but they have a fine sense of smelling, like wild beasts, so that they know when children approach them. When Hansel and Gretel came near the witch's house, she laughed wickedly, saying, "Here come 2 who shall not escape me." And early in the morning, before they awoke, she went up to them and saw how lovingly they lay sleeping with their chubby red cheeks, and she mumbled to herself, "What will be a good bite?" Then she took up Hansel with her rough hand and shut him up in a little cage with a lattice door, and although he screamed loudly, it was of no use. Gretel came next, and shaking her till she awoke, she said, "Get up, you lazy thing, and fetch some water to cook something good for your brother, who must remain in that stall and get fat. When he is fat enough, I shall eat him." Gretel began to cry, but it was all useless, for the old witch made her do as she wished. So a nice meal was cooked for Hansel, but Gretel got nothing else but a crab's claw. Every morning the old witch came to the cage and said, "Hansel, stretch your finger, that I may feel whether you are getting fat." But Hansel used to stretch out a bone, and the old woman, having very bad sight, thought it was his finger, and wondered very much that it did not get fat. When 4 weeks had passed, and Hansel still kept quite lean, she lost all her patience and would not wait any longer. "Gretel," she called out in a passion, "get some water quickly. Be Hansel fat or lean, this morning I will kill and cook him." Oh, how the poor little sister grieved as she was forced to fetch the water, and how fast the tears ran down her cheeks. "Dear good God, help us now," she exclaimed. "Had we only been eaten by the wild beasts in the wood, then we should have died together." But the old witch called out, "Leave off that noise. It will not help you a bit." So early in the morning, Gretel was forced to go out and fill the kettle and make a fire. "First we will bake, however," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough," and so saying she pushed poor Gretel up to the oven, out of which the flames were burning fiercely. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is hot enough, and then we will put in the bread." But she intended, when Gretel got in, to shut up the oven and let her bake, so that she might eat her as well as Hansel. Gretel perceived what her thoughts were, and said, "I do not know how to do it. How shall I get in?" "You stupid goose," said she, "the opening is big enough. See, I could even get in myself." And she got up and put her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a push, so that she fell right in, and then shutting the iron door, she bolted it. Oh, how horribly she howled, but Gretel ran away and left the ungodly witch to burn to ashes. Now she ran to Hansel, and opening the door called out, "Hansel, we are saved, the old witch is dead." So he sprang out like a bird out of his cage when the door is opened, and they were so glad that they fell upon each other's neck and kissed each other over and over again. And now, as there was nothing to fear, they went into the witch's house, where in every corner were caskets full of pearls and precious stones. "These are better than pebbles," said Hansel, putting as many into his pocket as it would hold. While Gretel thought, "I will take some home too," and filled her apron full. "We must be off now," said Hansel. and get out of this bewitched forest. But when they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a large piece of water. We cannot get over, said Hansel. I can see no bridge at all. And there is no boat either, said Gretel. But there swims a white duck. I will ask her to help us over. And she sang, Little duck, good little duck, Gretel and Hansel, here we stand. There is neither stile nor bridge. Take us on your back to land. So the duck came to them, and Hansel sat himself on, and bade his sister sit behind him. No, answered Gretel, that will be too much for the duck. She shall take us over one at a time. This the good little bird did, and when both were happily arrived on the other side, and had gone a little way, they came to a well-known wood, which they knew the better every step they went, and at last they perceived their father's house. Then they began to run, and bursting into the house, they fell on their father's neck. He had not one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest, and his wife was dead. Gretel shook her apron, and the pearls and precious stones rolled out upon the floor, and Hansel threw down one handful after the other out of his pocket. Then all their sorrows were ended, and they lived together in great happiness. My tale is done, there runs a mouse, whoever catches her may make a great, great cap out of her fur. So, in case you didn't quite catch the ending there, so his second wife was now also dead. You can perceive into the story that she herself was actually the witch. So, yeah. Yikes. Oh, our legendary witch. Aw, thank you. Alright. I will take yet another swig of water. Alrighty. Okay. I think we're ready for the next one. So the next one is the 3 snake leaves. There was once a poor man who was unable to feed his only son any longer. So the son said, My dear father, everything goes badly with you, and I am a burden to you. I would rather go away and see how I can earn my own bread. So the father gave him his blessing and took leave of him with great grief. At that time the king of a powerful empire was at war, and the youth, taking service under him, went with him to the field. When he came in sight of the enemy, battle was given, and he was in great peril, and the arrows flew so fast that his comrades fell all around him on all sides. And when the captain was killed, the rest would have taken to flight, but the youth, stepping forward, spoke to them courageously, exclaiming, We will not let our fatherland be ruined. Then the others followed him, and then pressed on and beat the enemy. As soon as the king heard that he had to thank him alone for the victory, he raised him above all the others, gave him great treasures, and made him first in his kingdom. Now the king had a daughter who was very beautiful, but she was also very whimsical. She had made a vow never to take a lord and husband who would not promise, if she should die first, to let himself be buried alive with her. Does he love me with all his heart? Said she. What use to him, then, can his life be afterwards. At the same time, she was prepared to do the same thing, and if her husband should die first, to descend with him to the grave. Wow, that's interesting. This vow had hitherto frightened away all suitors, but the youth was so taken with her beauty that he waited for nothing, but immediately asked her in marriage of her father. "Do you know," said the king, "what you must promise?" "I must go with her to the grave," he replied, "if I survive her, but my love is so great that I mind not the danger." Then the king consented, and the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. For a long time they lived happily and contented with one another, until it happened that the young queen fell grievously sick, so that no physician could cure her. When she died, the young prince remembered his forced promise, and shuddered at the thought of laying himself alive in the grave. But there was no escape, for the king had set watchers at all the doors, and it was not possible to avoid his fate. When the day came that the body should be laid in the royal vault, he was led away with it, and the door closed and locked behind him. Near the coffin stood a table, having upon it 4 lights, 4 loaves of bread, and 4 bottles of wine. As soon as this supply came to an end, he must die of hunger. Full of bitterness and sorrow, he sat down eating each day but a little morsel of bread, and taking but 1 draught of wine. Every day he saw death approaching nearer and nearer. Whilst he thus sat gazing before him, he saw a snake creeping out of the corner of the vault, which approached the dead body. Thinking that it came to feed on the body, he drew his sword, and exclaiming, "So long as I live, you shall not touch her," he cut it in 3 pieces. After a while, another snake crawled out of the corner, but when it saw the other lying dead, it went back, and returned soon with 3 green leaves in its mouth. Then it took the 3 pieces of the snake, and laying them together so as to join, it put 1 leaf upon each wound. As soon as the divided parts were joined, the snake moved and was alive again, and both snakes hastened away together. There's something you don't see every day, let me tell you. Whew. The leaves remained lying on the ground, and the unfortunate king, who had seen all, bethought himself whether the miraculous power of the leaves, which had restored a snake to life, might not help a man. So he picked up the leaves and laid 1 on the mouth of the corpse, and the other 2 on her eyes, and he had scarcely done so when the blood circulated again in the veins, and mounting into the pale countenance, flushed it with color. Then she drew her breath, opened her eyes, and said, "Ah, where am I?" "You are with me, dear wife," he replied, and told her how everything had happened, and how he had brought her to life. Then he helped her to some wine and bread, and when her strength had returned, she raised herself up, and they went to the door, and knocked and shouted so loudly that the watchers heard them and told the king. The king came down himself and opened the door, and there found them both alive and well, and he rejoiced with them that their trouble had passed away. But the young king took away the 3 snake leaves and gave them to his servant, saying, "Preserve them carefully for me, and carry them with you at all times. Who knows in what necessity they may not help us?" A change, however, had come over the wife after she was restored to life, and it was as if all love for her husband had passed out of her heart. And when some little time after he wished to make a voyage over the sea to his old father, and they had gone on board the ship, she forgot the great love and fidelity which he had shown, and through which he had saved her life, and disclosed a wicked plan to the captain. When the young prince lay asleep, she called up the captain, and taking the sleeper by the head while he carried the feet. They threw the prince into the sea. And as soon as the evil deed was done, she said to the captain, "Now let us return home and say he died on the voyage. I will so praise and commend you to my father that he shall give you to me in marriage, and you shall sit as his heir." But the faithful servant, who had seen all unremarked, and let loose a little boat from the ship, and getting in it himself, rowed after his master, and let the betrayers sail away. He fished the dead body up again, and by the help of the 3 snake leaves which he carried with him, he brought him happily to life again. Then they both rowed away with all their strength, day and night, and their little boat glided on so fast that they arrived before the others at the old king's palace. He marveled to see them return alone, and asked what had happened. When he heard of the wickedness of his daughter, he said, "I can scarcely believe that she has done such evil, but the truth will soon come to light." Then he bade them both go into a secret chamber and keep themselves private from everybody. Soon afterwards, the great vessel came sailing up, and the godless wife appeared before her father with a sorrowful countenance. "Why are you returned alone?" he asked. "Where is your husband?" "Alas, dear father," she replied, "I returned home with great grief, for my husband was suddenly taken ill during the voyage and died, and if the good captain had not given me his assistance, it would have gone terribly with me. He was present at my husband's death, and can tell you all about it." The king said, "I will bring the dead to life." And opening the chamber, he bade the prince and his servant both to come forth. As soon as the wife perceived her husband, she was struck as if by lightning, and falling to her knees, she begged his pardon. But the king answered, "For you there is no pardon. He was ready to die with you, and gave you life again. But you have conspired against him in his sleep, and shall receive your due reward." Then she was put with her companion in crime on board a ship which was pierced with holes, and drawn out into the sea, and they soon sank beneath the waves. Wow. Yet another interesting, these are all very interesting stories. The tales that they have to tell, and the consequences that, were given, which, they're theatrical in a way, I guess you could say, to be able to teach children lessons like, you do bad things, there's, bad consequences. If you do good things, there's good consequences. And so that's probably why, like, the bad consequences in these stories is, like, so big and dramatic, because it's to help, like, drive a point home with these stories. But they're interesting. For sure. All right, we've got yet another classic, well-known story for our next one. It is Rapunzel. So again, I will take a swig of water, or get some water here. All right, and I will read the well-known classic, Rapunzel. Once upon a time, there lived a man and his wife who much wished to have a child, but for a long time in vain. These people had a little window in the back part of their house, out of which one could see into a beautiful garden, which was full of fine flowers and vegetables, but it was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go in, because it belonged to a witch who possessed great power, and who was feared by the whole world. To be, like, feared by the whole world, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Also, that's a lot of power. That's a lot of power to have. But anyways, one day the woman stood at this window looking into the garden, and there she saw a bed which was filled with the most beautiful radishes, and which seemed so fresh and green that she felt quite glad, and a great desire seized her to eat one of these radishes. This wish returned daily, and as she knew that she could not partake of them, she fell ill, and looked very pale and miserable. This frightened her husband, who asked, "What ails you, my dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I cannot get any of those radishes to eat out of the garden behind the house, I shall die." The husband, loving her very much, thought, "Rather than let my wife die, I must fetch her some radishes, cost what they may." So in the gloom of the evening, he climbed the wall of the witch's garden, and snatching a handful of radishes in great haste, brought them to his wife, who made herself a salad with them, which she ate with relish. However, they were so nice and so well flavored that the next day, after she felt the same desire for the third time, and could not get any rest. So in the evening he made himself ready, and began clambering up the wall, but oh, how terribly frightened he was, for there he saw the old witch standing before him. "How dare you," she began, looking at him with a frightful scowl, "how dare you climb over into my garden and take away my radishes like a thief? Evil shall happen to you for this." "Ah," he replied, "let pardon be granted before justice. I have only done this from a great necessity. My wife saw your radishes from her window, and took such a fancy to them that she would have died if she had not eaten of them." Then the witch ran after him in a passion, saying, "If she behave as you say, I will let you take away all the radishes you please, but I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. All shall go well with it, and I will care for it like a mother." In his anxiety the man consented, and when the child was born, the witch appeared at the same time, gave the child the name Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew to the most beautiful child under the sun, and when she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in the tower, which stood in a forest, and it had neither stairs nor door, and only one little window just at the top. When the witch wished to enter, she stood beneath and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." For Rapunzel had long and beautiful hair, as fine as spun gold, and as soon as she heard the witch's voice, she unbound her tresses, opened the window, and let the hair fall down 20 ells, and the witch mounted up by it. After a couple of years had passed, it happened... I gotta turn the page here, and it's being difficult. After a couple of years had passed, it happened that the king's son was riding through the wood, and came by the tower. There he heard a song so beautiful that he stood still and listened. It was Rapunzel, who, to pass the time of her loneliness away, was exercising her sweet voice. The king's son wished to ascend to her, and looked for a door to the tower, but he could not find one. So he rode home, but the song had touched his heart so much that he went every day to the forest and listened to it. And as he thus stood one day behind a tree, he saw the witch come up, and heard her call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel let down her tresses, and the witch mounted up. "Is that the ladder on which one must climb? Then I will try my luck too," said the prince, and the following day, as he felt quite lonely, he went to the tower and said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then the tresses fell down, and he climbed up. Rapunzel was much frightened at first when a man came in, for she had never seen one before. But the king's son began to talk in a friendly way to her, and told her how his heart had been so moved by her singing that he had no peace until he had seen her himself. So Rapunzel lost her terror, and when he asked her if she would have him for a husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "Anyone may have me rather than the old woman." So saying, "Yes," she put her hand within his. "I will willingly go with you, but I know not how I am to descend. When you come, bring with you a skin of silk each time, out of which I will weave a ladder, and when it is ready, I will come down by it, and you must take me upon your horse." Then they agreed, that they should never meet until the evening, as the witch came in the daytime. The old woman remarked nothing about it until one time Rapunzel began to say to her, "Tell me, mother, how it happens you find it more difficult to come up to me than the young king's son, who is with me in a moment." "Oh, you wicked child!" exclaimed the witch. "What do I hear? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." And seizing Rapunzel's beautiful hair in a fury, she gave her a couple of blows with her left hand, and taking a pair of scissors in her right, snip, snip, she cut it all off, and the beautiful tresses lay upon the ground. Then she was so hard-hearted that she took the poor maiden into a great desert, and left her to live in great misery and grief. But the same day, when the old witch had carried Rapunzel off in the evening, she made the tresses fast above to the window latch, and when the king's son came and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let them down. The prince mounted, but when he got to the top he found not his dear Rapunzel, but the witch, who looked at him with furious and wicked eyes. "Aha!" she exclaimed scornfully. "You would fetch your dear wife, but the beautiful bird sits no longer in her nest singing. The cat has taken her away, and will now scratch out your eyes. To you Rapunzel is lost. You will never see her again." The prince lost his senses with grief at these words, and sprang out of the window of the tower in his bewilderment. His life he escaped with, but the thorns into which he fell put out his eyes. So he wandered blind in the forest, eating nothing but roots and berries, and doing nothing but weeping and lamenting for the loss of his dear wife. He wandered about thus in great misery for some few years, and at last arrived at the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, lived in great sorrow. Hearing a voice which he thought he knew, he went up to her, and as he approached, Rapunzel recognized him and fell upon his neck and wept. Two of her tears moistened his eyes, and they became clear again, so that he could see as well as formerly. Then he led her away to his kingdom, where he was received with great demonstrations of joy, and where they lived long contented and happy. What became of the old witch, no one ever knew. Interesting. So yeah, there's something a little in there that most people don't know probably about the Rapunzel story is they did some stuff in that tower. They did more than just talk and eat cookies. Seeing as she gave birth to twins. There's another story that has something similar to that. I'm not going to mention which story. We will get to that eventually. It's either a Brothers Grimm story or a Hans Christian Andersen story. I don't remember which. Actually, I could probably look at the table of contents and find out. If it's in here, let's see. Oh, I gotta get through all these introductory pages first. And there's a lot of them. Trying to find the table of contents. Here we go. All right. So we've read quite a few stories already between the first video and this. We've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Rapunzel was our 12th story. Wait, did I read like 6 each time? No, I didn't. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I read 5 the first one and now 7 today. Okay, not bad. Let's see. So we've got things in this book, stories that you can look forward to in the future. We've got things like Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood is in here. Let's see. Thumbling. There's one called The Godfather and The Godfather Death. Those are 2 separate stories. That's interesting. The Golden Bird. Let's see. Okay. So the one story that I am thinking of that has something in it that most people don't know about, I think it is in here. So that's going to be an interesting read. I read it, I don't know how many years ago, and I might have actually read it for a college class. There was this one college class that I took, and this can be kind of like your hint onto which story it might be. If you don't know, don't spoil yourself and look it up. Wait until I get to that story. But years ago, when I was doing college, there was this one children's literature course that I took, and I absolutely loved that class. I loved that class so much. It was so much fun. And the professor of that class did like a whole theme that semester for the class that she called Debunking Disney. And it was so much fun because we had to read the original story, and then in class we would watch the Disney equivalent of the story. And let me tell you, oh my goodness, Disney definitely made those stories a lot more family friendly. Some of the things that are taken out of some of those stories, like from the original, wow. They made those stories a lot nicer. So if you've ever had thoughts, and even if you haven't necessarily had thoughts, like growing up with Disney stories, like if you fell in love with, all the Disney classics and grew up with Disney movies and all of that, if you ever go back and read those stories, just beware. They are not as whimsical as Disney makes them out to be. So fair warning we just read Rapunzel, which that is a Disney movie now. And you can see definitely different than what Disney presented. So So just fair warning, if you ever go to read the originals, or if you've thought about reading the original stories, they're not as whimsical and as lovely as Disney makes them out to be. So, yeah. And there's one in particular that, like I was saying, that the whole like Rapunzel having twins thing reminds me of. So, and you'll know when we get to it. Yeah. Anyway. Oh my goodness. I think I'm gonna call it here. My voice is pretty okay, but there is like a little bit of a strain with having to try to talk this way and doing it for a long period of time. I would like to talk normal again. So, yeah, so all of these ASMR or ASMR like reading streams are going to be on the shorter side, at least shorter for what is typical for me. Yeah, because it's a lot, and just to be sitting here and read for 3, 4, 5 hours out loud, that's a lot to ask. So, for now, that's a no. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed part 2 of the reading. I don't know when I'll get around to part 3. But if you like these, just, I guess keep your eyes peeled. I don't know how often I'm going to keep doing these, but every once in a while I'll do one to be able to add it to the list. And I don't know if you've noticed on my channel or not, but I have started to make playlists. So if you're interested in, listening to the ASMR videos, you can go to the playlist tab on my channel and just go ahead and start listening to them. So yeah. But I hope you all have a good rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. And I will see you tomorrow for my first ever karaoke, and it also happens to be Christmas. So yeah, look forward to that. It will be unarchived. So if you don't show up, you'll miss it. Sorry. So be there or be square. All right. So yeah, look forward to that, and hopefully I will see you there tomorrow. Starting a little bit later than is typical for me. I know that there's times where I'll start at like 2:30 EST, 11:30 PST. But then my other days, normally I do either like noon or 12:30 EST, which is 9 or 9:30 PST. But tomorrow I'll be starting at 10, like 2 p.m. or 10 a.m. depending on your time zone. So yeah, look forward to that, and I will see you there tomorrow. All right, have a good rest of your day, and don't forget to read a book. Bye.